The beginning of every journey into self-discovery often arises from a moment of discomfort, when a person feels that the life they are living no longer resonates with the life they are meant to live. In that moment of stillness and questioning, a door begins to open, revealing the possibility of something greater. The introduction to our exploration must begin here, with the recognition that countless individuals carry an unspoken ache, the sense of being disconnected from their essence, their purpose, and their relationship with the universe. This silent longing is what brings you to a video like this, not merely to gather information but to rediscover a conversation with the divine that perhaps you thought you had lost. Imagine the subtle weight of waking each day with a heart that wonders if it is truly aligned with something higher. Many have lived with the quiet fear that life is slipping by without meaning, that their desires are too distant, or that their dreams will never materialize. This fear does not emerge from weakness, but from the very depth of the soul's hunger for alignment and clarity. It is in these moments that asking the right question to the universe becomes the bridge between silence and response, between doubt and certainty. The essence of this teaching lies in refining how we inquire, for the universe is always communicating, but its language requires a listener attuned with sincerity and presence. When we begin to understand that the questions we carry shape the answers we perceive, life ceases to appear random. Each thought, each word, each whisper of longing becomes part of an ongoing dialogue. The introduction of this journey is not to promise instant transformation, but to remind you that there exists a rhythm, a sacred intelligence, waiting to respond to your voice. Together, we will uncover how to shift from vague cries of confusion to clear invitations for guidance. This is not about forcing destiny, but about remembering how to stand in harmony with it. From this space, every synchronicity, every pause, and every confirmation turns into evidence that you are not walking alone, but are in continuous conversation with the infinite. The silent weight of misaligned questions. Every person who seeks answers from the universe carries an invisible weight, the tension of asking without clarity and living without confirmation. It is not uncommon to spend months or even years repeating the same inquiries in different forms. Why am I not prospering? When will love arrive? Why is nothing working for me? Only to encounter silence that feels unbearable. That silence does not mean neglect or abandonment. It is often the echo of a misaligned question. A question shaped by fear, guilt, or comparison rarely produces guidance that brings peace, because it arises from a frequency of contraction rather than openness. This is the first great truth to understand. The quality of the question creates the quality of the dialogue. When you pause to notice, you will see how these questions affect the body. The shoulders lift, the chest tightens, the stomach contracts. The body responds to the despair hidden behind the words. Such physiological responses are not random. They are indicators of how energy is being held. To ask the universe from a space of contraction is to limit the field of possibilities you can perceive. You are not punished by silence. You are simply unable to perceive the subtle answers that surround you. The longing for a sign becomes tangled with the fear of being forgotten, and the mind interprets every delay as rejection. The hidden power of intention semantics. Every question has layers beneath its surface, and most people never take time to examine them. The first layer is the explicit content, what you think you are asking. The second is the emotional context, what feeling accompanies the question. The third is the unspoken contract, how you will recognize the answer when it arrives. Neglecting this third layer is the reason why many seekers wander through life misinterpreting coincidences or dismissing true guidance. The universe is always willing to meet you, but without clarity in your recognition system, you either see signs everywhere or nowhere. Consider this. If you ask, "Show me if this path is right," and decide that a response will be confirmed by a simple repetition of the word yes, your mind may begin projecting yes onto every conversation, every advertisement, and every random message. That is apophenia, the brain's habit of finding patterns where none exist. But if you set a contract such as, "Within the next 72 hours I will encounter 2 independent events, unrelated to each other, that point to the same direction," you reduce noise and create space for true convergence. This is not superstition, it is the discipline of attention. The misconception of delay. Many people claim that the universe is slow to respond, but what is truly slow is the human capacity to sustain a clear search pattern. The reticular activating system in the brain, the very mechanism that filters reality, cannot prioritize vague commands. A scattered question creates scattered perception. Moreover, dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation, fluctuates wildly when we demand instant answers. Euphoria rises when we believe we have found a sign, only to collapse into disappointment when it fades. This cycle breeds exhaustion and the belief that guidance is unavailable. In reality, it is consistency that reveals alignment. Holding a single question with emotional steadiness for 1 or 2 weeks often uncovers convergences that were invisible before. The threefold protocol of alignment. Clarity is the first movement. A vague longing must be translated into terms that can be observed and measured. Instead of asking for purpose, ask, which activities, when I dedicate an hour to them, consistently generate a sense of expansion and usefulness and appear in my schedule at least twice a week over the next month. This form of inquiry transforms an abstraction into a tangible exploration. Coherence is the second movement. Before you ask, cultivate coherence in the body. Spend a few minutes breathing rhythmically, inhaling for 5 seconds, exhaling for 5 seconds, while recalling a memory of gratitude that calms the nervous system. The intention then emerges from alignment rather than urgency. Confirmation is the final movement. Write down a clear recognition contract. Define how many convergences will count, within what time frame, and from which kinds of sources. Record the outcomes daily. Without this practice of recording, memory distorts evidence, exaggerating failures and forgetting confirmations. By keeping track, you create a mirror of your dialogue with the universe, one that resists the volatility of fleeting emotions. The metaphor of telescope and lighthouse. Imagine standing under a vast night sky with a telescope in hand. Without coordinates, you spin endlessly, catching glimpses of stars, but never mapping a constellation. A clear question provides the coordinates, coherence sharpens the lens, confirmation becomes the lighthouse in the distance, signaling that you are on course. Asking from fear or vagueness is like navigating without instruments, confusing any glimmer of light for true direction. When the instruments align, the journey no longer depends on chance, it becomes navigable. This metaphor teaches that signals are not destinations. They are markers along a route that still requires your movement. If you wait endlessly for a perfect sign without taking steps, you will drift. But when you act on aligned confirmations, you transform signals into progress. Recognizing the subtle blocks. There is a danger in collecting signs without making decisions. This habit turns spirituality into entertainment, feeding the mind with small thrills while denying the soul the courage of action. Each confirmation is meant to be lived, not stored. Another hidden block is the tendency to delay life until perfect certainty arrives. People often whisper to themselves, "When I finally know for sure, then I will begin." But certainty is born through movement. By beginning with small, grounded steps, the path refines itself, and questions gain sharper focus. There is also the quiet shame of desiring. Many disguise their true intentions to appear evolved, spiritual, or detached. They reshape questions to impress an invisible audience, rather than to open their hearts honestly to the universe. Until a person dares to ask for what truly matters to them, without filtering through expectations of others, the answers will remain faint. Cultivating a practice of attuned inquiry. For the next 7 days, dedicate each morning to a single clear question. Write it, breathe into coherence, establish your confirmation contract, and live the day open to subtle convergences. At night, review your notes and mark how many signals appeared. This is not an exercise in superstition, it is a discipline of listening. Over time, patterns will reveal themselves, and decisions will feel less like leaps into the void and more like steps onto solid ground. In doing so, you will discover that life is not withholding guidance. The universe is already speaking in countless ways, but it requires a listener who is both precise and patient. When your questions evolve from vague longing into clear invitations, every silence becomes meaningful, every convergence becomes sacred, and every decision becomes an act of dialogue rather than guesswork. The restless urge for control. Anxiety often arises when a person feels the universe is silent, when no clear signal appears to confirm the next step. Beneath this unease lies the urge to control the pace of life, to demand instant clarity, as though certainty were a commodity to be purchased on demand. Yet spiritual alignment does not unfold at the rhythm of impatience. The mind, restless and insistent, seeks immediate reassurance, while the body yearns for a slower, more harmonious pace. This inner conflict creates static, distorting the very questions meant to bring guidance. Instead of curiosity, there is urgency. Instead of openness, there is constant monitoring of every detail. This pattern is not a sign of failure, but of unprocessed memories. Deep within, many carry experiences of disappointment, losses that shape the nervous system to expect pain. When new questions are posed to the universe, the body recalls those memories and anticipates rejection. The spirit desires connection, but the mind insists on protection. The result is a flood of doubt, a state in which signs are either fabricated through overinterpretation or missed altogether through skepticism. The meaning of latency. Between the moment of asking and the moment of perceiving lies a sacred interval. This interval, which can be called meaningful latency, is not a void, but a workshop. It is the space in which subtle forces begin arranging threads, and where the seeker is invited to refine the purity of intention. Too often this latency is mistaken for absence. People forget that silence itself is a form of answer, directing attention to what is not yet ready or not aligned. If this interval is embraced, it becomes a classroom, teaching patience, discernment, and trust. Within this latency, the body also speaks. Subtle sensations, tightening when a path is unsuitable, soft expansion when a direction resonates, offer a form of guidance more reliable than fleeting external symbols. Listening to these somatic whispers cultivates a dialogue that is intimate, direct, and profoundly real. It reframes the interval from something to be endured into something to be cherished. The voice of silence. Silence, often feared as indifference, is in truth one of the clearest responses. When a door does not open, it may be a safeguard rather than a rejection. When a plan does not move forward, it may be life preventing exhaustion or misalignment. The absence of immediate confirmation is not proof of neglect. It is evidence that the universe values clarity enough to withhold premature answers. The wisdom here lies in shifting the question. Rather than asking, "Why is nothing happening?" one might ask, "What is the silence revealing about my request?" This shift transforms emptiness into revelation. Such reframing deepens the journey. Silence is not meant to create despair, but to sharpen awareness of where energy should not be invested. The mind may label this delay as wasted time, but the spirit recognizes it as protection and refinement. To thank the silence is to acknowledge that the invisible hand guiding life is also capable of saying no. The practice of recording evidence. To cultivate trust in this process, recording experiences becomes essential. A journal of evidence divided into clear sections, question observed events and decisions, anchors perception. In this way, vague impressions are replaced by a structured map of convergences. Adding parameters such as timeframes and minimum repetitions creates a filter that distinguishes meaningful alignment from coincidence. Instead of drifting between doubt and fantasy, the seeker stands on documented experience. This practice restores responsibility. The seeker no longer waits passively for destiny, but engages in a dialogue where each observation leads to considered action. It transforms spirituality from abstraction into a lived experiment, where each day offers data that deepens trust. Over weeks and months, patterns emerge, revealing the subtle consistency of guidance that is often overlooked in memory. The image of the gardener. Consider the gardener who places a seed in the soil. He does not dig it up daily to measure progress, nor does he demand the fruit to appear before its time. Instead, he waters with patience, trusting the season, trusting the unseen work of roots. To interfere constantly would harm the very process he desires. In the same way, when questions are planted in coherence, they must be allowed to mature. The latency is not delay but growth beneath the surface, hidden from view yet essential to the harvest. The gardener adjusts only what is within his care: soil, water, protection from pests. He does not command the sun to shine on demand. Likewise, in the practice of asking, one's role is to maintain alignment, to refine intention, and to observe with openness. The timing of responses belongs to a larger intelligence, one that honors the rhythm of creation more than the urgency of impatience. The subtle shadows of comparison. Another barrier often overlooked is the tendency to compare timelines. Observing how quickly others seem to receive answers creates an energy of competition, as if manifestation were a race. This distorts the purity of inquiry, shifting focus from authenticity to rivalry. Each soul carries a unique rhythm. To measure by another's pace is to lose harmony with one's own. The universe is not responding to who is fastest, but to who is most aligned. Comparison blinds the eye to subtle confirmations. While one waits for dramatic signs, smaller but significant signals pass unnoticed. In truth, many of the most powerful affirmations arrive gently, through repeated whispers rather than thunderclaps. Trusting in your rhythm means honoring both the silence and the convergence that appear without drama, but with undeniable clarity. The call toward inner rhythm. Ultimately, this chapter reminds us that manifestation is not about forcing life into submission, but about attuning to its inner rhythm. Asking becomes meaningful when it is freed from control and urgency. Silence becomes a companion rather than an enemy. Recording becomes a ritual that strengthens faith, and patience ceases to feel like waiting. It becomes participation in a sacred unfolding. The restless urge for control may never vanish completely, but it can be transformed into attentiveness. Instead of grasping, you can learn to listen. Instead of demanding, you can choose to receive. This transformation requires courage, for silence challenges the ego's desire for instant confirmation. But it also offers peace, for once you recognize the language of latency, the need for constant reassurance fades, replaced by a steady trust that guidance is never absent. The confusion between symbol and superstition. When the heart longs for confirmation, it is tempting to treat every coincidence as a divine message. Numbers repeating on a clock, a phrase overheard in passing, or a bird crossing one's path can easily be taken as unquestionable proof. Yet when this habit becomes compulsive, spirituality begins to lose depth and collapses into superstition. The soul does not require a spectacle to recognize truth. What it requires is discernment. Misinterpreting trivial events as sacred signs not only leads to disillusionment, but also dilutes the ability to recognize authentic synchronicity. The danger lies not in noticing patterns, but in forcing them to carry meanings they were never meant to bear. At the core of this confusion is the human desire for immediacy. When answers are not arriving quickly enough, the restless mind attempts to generate them artificially. This is not a fault, but a reflection of vulnerability, a longing to feel seen by the universe. Still, the outcome is the opposite of what is desired. The more random events are treated as ultimate truths, the less one is able to trust the genuine whispers of guidance. To step out of this cycle, it becomes essential to restore dignity to the dialogue with the divine, approaching signs not as tricks to be decoded, but as authentic convergences worthy of reverence. The distinction between signal, symbol, and synchronicity. Clarity begins by naming the differences. A signal is an observable event that attracts attention. A symbol is the meaning you ascribe to that event, often shaped by personal history, culture, or archetype. Synchronicity is the convergence of events that, though not causally connected, reveal significance through their alignment with your inner state. When these categories blur, confusion arises. Treating every signal as a synchronicity overwhelms perception. Treating every synchronicity as mere coincidence denies the intimacy of divine conversation. Understanding these layers brings balance. A signal may be neutral until you assign meaning. A symbol may be rich with resonance but still subjective. A synchronicity is recognized not by intensity, but by its unmistakable convergence, when unrelated threads begin weaving into a coherent tapestry. This framework does not strip life of its mystery. Rather, it protects the sacredness of true encounters by distinguishing them from projections. The protective role of confirmation. When emotions run high, whether in hope or despair, the risk of misinterpretation grows stronger. Desire can be so overwhelming that it colors perception, urging the seeker to force meaning onto whatever appears. This is why confirmation must include safeguards. Independent sources, varied channels, and repeated patterns serve as filters that ensure authenticity. By requiring these elements, one is not rejecting faith, but strengthening it. Protection is not a denial of mystery. It is a way of honoring it. Think of it as a covenant with yourself, I will not declare certainty until multiple signals converge. Such discipline does not diminish the spiritual journey, but elevates it. It shields the heart from premature conclusions and keeps the mind from spiraling into obsessive pattern seeking. In this way, the practice of asking becomes not a game of superstition, but a process of deliberate and respectful inquiry. The framework of relevance, alignment, and impact. To deepen discernment, 3 guiding questions can be applied to any potential sign. Relevance asks whether the event speaks directly to the question being held. Alignment examines whether the body responds with stable expansion rather than anxious excitement. Impact considers whether the event influences a tangible next step in life. When an event satisfies at least 2 of these dimensions, it deserves attention. When all 3 align, it becomes a clear call to action. This framework does not trivialize intuition, but strengthens it with grounded discernment. It ensures that the sacred dialogue is not lost in the noise of daily randomness. Such structure may seem rigid to some, but in truth, it liberates. Instead of wandering in a fog of ambiguous impressions, the seeker moves with clarity. Every recognition becomes part of a recorded journey, creating trust not only in the universe, but also in one's own interpretive capacity. The balance of intuition with discernment is where the deepest peace is found. The metaphor of the radio signal. Picture the seeker as a radio operator, tuning an instrument to catch the faint frequencies of a distant station. Without calibration, static overwhelms the message. With careful tuning, clarity emerges. The signal does not change. What changes is the ability to receive it. Life works in the same way. The questions we ask are the frequency. The coherence of our being is the antenna, and the rituals of reflection and recording are the logbook. When all these elements come together, the voice of guidance is no longer faint but steady. This image reveals that the universe is not silent. It is always transmitting, but many lives surrounded by static, unable to distinguish between interference and message. Discernment, like tuning a radio, requires patience and precision. It requires humility to admit when the antenna is misaligned, and it requires discipline to return again and again to the practice of adjustment. Through such work, what once seemed like noise becomes a song of unmistakable clarity, the path toward discerned listening. The journey of manifestation is not a hunt for spectacular signs, but a refinement of perception. True guidance is often quieter than expected, arriving not with fireworks, but with gentle repetitions that confirm direction. To trust these subtler forms requires a heart willing to release the addiction to drama. It requires courage to accept that genuine answers may appear ordinary, and yet carry extraordinary significance. Discerned listening restores integrity to the dialogue with the universe. It honors the mystery without surrendering to confusion. It welcomes guidance without projecting fantasies, and it turns silence into a companion rather than a threat. The soul, when trained in this way, begins to perceive life itself as a continuous response, sometimes spoken, sometimes whispered, sometimes withheld, but always purposeful. In this way, every day becomes part of an unfolding conversation where meaning is neither fabricated nor lost but received with reverence and trust. When the subject turns to prosperity, the act of asking the universe often becomes tangled with judgment. The mind creates a courtroom where every desire is interrogated. Am I worthy of abundance? Is this selfish? Am I too late? These questions, though subtle, drain energy and distort clarity. Prosperity then feels less like a possibility and more like a trial, where the verdict always hovers between guilt and hesitation. This tribunal is not the voice of the universe, but the echo of old conditioning, beliefs inherited from family, culture, or past failures. While the soul seeks growth, the inner judge demands justification, leaving the seeker exhausted before any real journey begins. Such patterns manifest not only in thought but in behavior. Oscillations occur, weeks of energy and bold plans, followed by weeks of paralysis and withdrawal. This inconsistency is not laziness, but the natural outcome of guilt-ridden inquiry. When every step forward is questioned by the tribunal, progress feels dangerous. The longing for prosperity is genuine, but the vessel carrying it is cracked by self-doubt. To heal this fracture, the practice of asking must be transformed from a trial into a laboratory, from judgment into exploration. The principle of service as compass. A little-known key to clarity and prosperity is reframing the intention through the lens of service. Instead of asking solely, "How can I prosper?" a deeper inquiry arises. How does my prosperity expand what I can offer? Service does not diminish personal gain, it dignifies it. The nervous system responds differently when intentions are framed around contribution. Rather than collapsing into self-defense, the body opens into cooperation. Prosperity is then no longer a solitary achievement, but a shared current, a flow that moves through you and into the world. This approach also frees the seeker from the trap of narcissism. Instead of waiting for external validation, the heart measures progress through usefulness. A musician who asks, "How can my art heal and inspire?" receives opportunities that align both with prosperity and purpose. A healer who asks, "How can my skills ease the suffering of others?" opens doors to clients, growth, and financial flow. The law of alignment responds not only to desire, but to the direction of that desire, the unexpected form of confirmation. One of the most surprising truths about prosperity is that confirmation often arrives not as sudden wealth or dramatic signs, but as concentrated work. The invitation to refine a project, deepen a skill, or dedicate steady effort to a new path is itself a response. Work is not punishment, it is partnership. When opportunities appear that demand consistent focus over weeks or months, the universe is not testing your worthiness but affirming your alignment. These seasons of effort are the very fabric through which prosperity manifests. Seen through this lens, challenges cease to be obstacles and become confirmations. A contract that requires discipline, a client who asks for excellence, or a project that stretches capacity, all of these are answers disguised as labor. The mistake lies in dismissing them as distractions, when in reality they are the universe saying, "Meet me here." Prosperity is rarely delivered in the form of instant prizes. It is woven through the threads of daily devotion. The practice of micro-thesis and experiment. To anchor this process, one can create what might be called a micro-thesis of value, a clear statement of what is being offered, to whom, and in what form. If I share this skill with this group, within 7 days, I will observe this response. Each micro-thesis becomes a living experiment. The results are not proof of ultimate destiny, but feedback, guiding refinement. A strong convergence invites further commitment. A weak convergence invites adjustment. By approaching prosperity as a series of experiments, fear of failure diminishes. Every attempt becomes valuable, either confirming direction or clarifying missteps. Over time, these experiments accumulate into trust, demonstrating that the universe responds consistently to clarity, contribution, and persistence. The seeker learns not to beg for prosperity, but to co-create it through alignment and iteration. The image of the artisan. Imagine an artisan working with wood. He does not impose his will upon the material, but studies its grain, sensing where it bends, where it resists, where it can be shaped with ease. Prosperity follows the same principle. It is not a matter of forcing outcomes, but of attuning to the flow of circumstances. When the artisan listens to the wood, creation becomes graceful. When you listen to the patterns of life, opportunities become visible. Prosperity is not manufactured through pressure, but coaxed into being through harmony with the grain of reality. In this metaphor, resistance is not failure but feedback. A market that does not respond, a path that feels heavy, a partnership that collapses, all are signals that the grain of life lies elsewhere. To persist in forceful chiseling leads to splintered wood and wasted energy. To adjust, to follow the natural lines, is to find beauty and strength. Prosperity is not a conquest, it is a collaboration with the material of existence. The renewal of permission, the quiet shadow beneath the quest for prosperity, is the fear of asking too much. Many shrink their desires, whispering them in half-hearted tones, hoping not to appear greedy. Yet the universe does not respond to half questions. To ask with hesitation is to receive in fragments. Permission must be renewed, not the permission granted by society, but the permission granted by your own heart. When desire is acknowledged honestly without masks, the energy of inquiry gains power. Granting yourself permission to prosper is not arrogance. It is the recognition that abundance flowing through you becomes abundance available to others. Prosperity is not theft from the collective, but contribution to it. To deny yourself prosperity is to diminish the potential generosity you could embody. Asking boldly, while remaining aligned with service, restores integrity to the relationship between desire and manifestation. The horizon of prosperity. When prosperity is sought through clarity, service, and persistence, the entire atmosphere of life begins to shift. Instead of the tribunal of judgment, there emerges a horizon of possibility. Each effort, each experiment, each confirmation becomes part of a larger dialogue that is not only financial, but spiritual. Prosperity ceases to be merely the accumulation of resources and becomes the unfolding of purpose. This horizon is not static, it expands as you expand. With every step, new questions arise, not as doubts but as invitations. How else can my prosperity serve? What new forms of contribution can emerge? Where is my alignment leading next? In this way, the journey is never complete, for prosperity is not an endpoint but a rhythm, one that grows richer, deeper, and more harmonious as you continue to ask, receive, and act in alignment. The journey we have walked together has revealed something profound. The act of asking the right question is not a casual gesture, but a sacred practice. Every word you choose, every state you embody, and every contract of confirmation you create is part of a dialogue with the universe that is both intimate and expansive. We have seen how misaligned questions can close doors, how silence can become a teaching, how discernment protects against illusion, and how prosperity unfolds not as a sudden gift, but as a rhythm of service and alignment. What emerges from this understanding is the realization that you are never abandoned in your search for meaning. The answers may not arrive in the form you expect, yet they are always present, sometimes as converging signals, sometimes as silence that redirects your path, sometimes as opportunities disguised as effort. This dialogue is continuous, and when you learn to listen with patience, courage, and clarity, life itself transforms into a living response. The power is not in demanding that the universe prove itself, but in recognizing that the universe is already speaking. The practice is to refine your perception, to record your experiences, and to honor both the whispers and the echoes that arise. In doing so, you free yourself from superstition, from judgment, and from the endless trial of worthiness. You step into authorship, not by controlling life, but by aligning with its intelligence. Prosperity, guidance, and connection are not distant prizes. They are the natural consequence of asking beautifully and listening faithfully. After this teaching, you no longer need to see life as a riddle. You can see it as a conversation, one where every question shapes your path and every answer reminds you that you are already part of something vast, meaningful, and alive. Before this video closes, take a moment to ask yourself, what is the one question I have been too afraid to ask the universe, and how would my life change if I dared to voice it with clarity today? That single inquiry could be the key that transforms silence into dialogue, doubt into direction, and longing into confirmation. If this teaching has touched you, I invite you to stay connected with this journey. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next steps, because each new lesson is designed to deepen your practice of alignment and clarity. As you continue, you will find that transformation does not happen in isolation, but in community, with others walking the same path. Stay with us now and continue watching the next video appearing on your screen. Let this conversation with the universe grow richer, one question at a time.